A very good afternoon, everybody. On this third day of our presentations, we are listening presentations made by semester 3 students. Okay? On the first 2 days, we had on Indian English literature, pre-independence and post-independence. Now today, we are going to have it on post-colonial studies. In the morning session, we had quite interesting presentations by the students. Now in this afternoon slot, let us read the topics. I'm sharing a screen. So here we will have the first presentation will be by NIRALI on decolonizing in the wretched of the earth, followed by SAGAR's presentation on Fanon's legacy in contemporary liberation movements. ROZMIN's on psychological problems in Indian crime through the lens of Frantz Fanon. SHRUTI's on rewriting empire. Rhys's wide Sargasso Sea as post-colonial feminist response to Charlotte Brontë's Jane Eyre. SHATAKSHI on colonial sea shadow. Race, gender and power in Rhys's wide Sargasso Sea. You have to see the quotation marks and the space that is required. So on the first day also we remarked that after this inverted commas, there is no space. After a single or double inverted commas, there is no space in between inverted commas. Before colon also there is no space. After colon there is a space. Before comma also no space. After comma there is a space. And no need to put this in double inverted comma. Colonial sea shadow. There is no need to put that in double inverted comma. It can be without that colon and then you can put the title. Wide Sargasso Sea is a title, so it should be in single inverted comma. In the previous one, Jane Eyre is also a title, that is SHRUTI's one, that also should be in single inverted comma. And all the keywords should be capitalized in the title. SRUSHTI's presentation will be on Beyond the Attic, Feminist and Post-Colonial Narratives in Wide Sargasso Sea. Devangini's on From Empire to Globalization, reading Coetzee's Foe as a post-colonial allegory. MANASI on Reading Ethically, the moral impact of Coetzee's narrative. SMRUTI on Who Controls the Story, Foe and Contemporary Concerns about Misinformation and Narrative Manipulation. Nishtha on Silenced Voices, Feminist Resistance in Wide Sargasso Sea and Helaro. Krishna on Defoe versus Coetzee, Rewriting Colonial Narratives, Comparing Robinson Crusoe with Foe's post-colonial lens. Robinson Crusoe you will have to write in single inverted comma. Nikita, Silence as Decolonial Strategy, Reclaiming Voice and Agency in Rhys's Wide Sargasso Sea and J.M. Coetzee's Foe. Tanvi on Silence, Voice and Resistance from Fanon's Decolonization to Post-Colonial Rewriting by Rhys and Coetzee. Rajdeep on Algorithmic Colonialism, Post-Colonial Perspectives on AI Ethics and Digital Power in the Global South. And the last one will be by Meeta, Bollywood, Nation and Identity, Decoding Post-Colonial Narratives in Indian Cinema. Meeta's name reminds me to tell that after this reminders that we have to keep on giving. Time and again we are telling that you are not a KG student, you are a PG student. And once it is told that this work should be done before you leave the class in the evening, then why that is not done? Two simple works we are tell that you have to do evaluation and you have to do the timestamp as soon as it is done. So then also why this is the third day, both the days we have to give the reminder, like in first semester also every day, second semester also almost every day. Now in the third semester also there is always one or two people who are forgetting to do the work. So this we need to overcome. We don't want now the another two to do the same thing. SHATAKSHI also, you have given 2 times, so the entire data get disturbed now. Now we cannot rely blindly, we have to work on that now. So you are multiplying our work unnecessarily by not following proper commands and other things there. And for topics also we tell that you have to give as early as possible, write the topic. So when we want to make a schedule, we can put it in a proper order. But in that also we have to keep on giving reminders that this topic is missing, that person's topic is missing. So you all have to see that these things should not be repeated. First semester it is fine. We understand that up till that time, nobody has told you how to work. What is it to work? કામ કરવું એટલે શું હોય, પંક્ચ્યુઆલિટી એટલે શું હોય, કદાચ કોઈ શીખવાડ્યું ના હોય આપણને, એટલે આપણાથી એવી ભૂલો થાય, એટલે પહેલા સેમેસ્ટરમાં આપણે માફ કરતા રહીએ કે ચલો કઈ વાંધો નહીં, બીજા સેમેસ્ટરમાં જતું કરીએ. પણ થર્ડ સેમેસ્ટરમાં you have now studied here for 1 year, and yet if you are not improving, then it is terrible. There is something problematic inside your mind then. Many of you will talk about Fanon and psychology. Apply those ideas on yourself also. What's problem in my mind that I keep on forgetting simple things? Why I can't remember simple instructions which are given and which is to be done? So why somebody will have to remind me again for such a task, and then only I do the work? So what's wrong with me? What is wrong with me that I don't do that? We told you the idea also. If you can't remember, keep a checklist. એક રિમાઇન્ડર જ તમે કેલેન્ડરમાં મૂકી દો મોબાઈલમાં તમારા, કે આટલા વાગે એટલે આ 2 કામ કરવાના છે, એટલે એ જ નોટિફિકેશન તમને આપશે કે આ કામ કરવાના છે. એ કરો, એ તો કરી શકાય ને, ભૂલાઈ જતું હોય તો. હવે પાસે 10-15 કામ આવે તો ભૂલાઈ જાય, એવું બની શકે. પણ ભૂલી જવા માટેનો કંઈક વિકલ્પ આપણે શોધવો પડે કે રિમાઇન્ડર મૂકી દઈએ, નોટિફિકેશન મૂકી દઈએ, એટલે મોબાઈલ ઓટોમેટિક તમને નોટિફાઈ કરશે. સાંજે 6 કે 7 વાગે તમે મૂકી દો આ 2 કામ કરવાના છે, એટલે 7 વાગે તમને નોટિફિકેશન આવી જાય, એટલે કામ પૂરું કરવાનું. So there are ways to do, and you have to find out a solution if you are forgetting things. કોઈ ડાયરી રાખતા હો તો એમાં ચેકલિસ્ટ રાખો કે આટલા કામ કરવાના છે. ડાયરી ન રાખો તો મોબાઈલમાં નોટિફિકેશન મૂકો. સમથિંગ યુ વિલ હેવ ટુ ડુ. અથવા એકાદ 2 સેક્રેટરી રાખી લો તમારા ભેગા કે જે તમને યાદ કરાવે કે મેડમ આજે આ કામ કરવાના છે. જેમ આઈએએસ ઓફિસરોની આજુબાજુ સેક્રેટરીની ફોજ હોય, એ લોકો ડાયરી રાખે કે મેડમ ને આજે શું કામ કરવાના છે. એ રોજ કે આજે આટલી મુલાકાત છે, આટલી મીટિંગો છે, તો એવું કરી શકાય. આપણે કોઈ સેક્રેટરી રાખી લે કે જે આપણને યાદ કરાવે. બટ સમથિંગ વિલ હેવ ટુ ડુ, કે આ રિપીટ ન થાય એ બહુ જરૂરી છે. દેટ વી વોન્ટ ટુ સી કે such simple things are not repeated now in third semester. In fourth it will become more terrible. ચોથામાં તો એ અસહ્ય થઈ જશે. It is better to leave department. એમ ભૂલ થશે કે આ ડિપાર્ટમેન્ટ એડમિશન ક્યાં લીધું, એવો અહેસાસ થવા માંડશે કે અહીંયા એડમિશન ન લીધું હોત તો જ સારું હતું, કે આટલું બધું સાંભળવું પડે. But we'll have to see કે we'll have to improve, otherwise it is better to leave. એવી આપણે બીજા કામ પ્રાયોરિટી હોય, આપણે કદાચ ડિપાર્ટમેન્ટનું કામ પ્રાયોરિટીમાં ન હોય, એટલે આપણને એના કામ કરવા ન ગમતા હોય, જે વસ્તુ પ્રાયોરિટીમાં ન હોય એ ન ગમે, તો એ જગ્યા છોડી દેવી સારી. ત્યાં શું કામ રહેવું જોઈએ આપણે, જ્યાં આપણને પસંદ ના આવે? You can leave that place and do what you like to do instead of the other work there. So this, if you will change, then things will happen. Otherwise there is no chance that you can do the work, and we unnecessarily have to waste our time in giving such simple instructions time and again. Such simple things like a reminder, like we are your secretaries who keep on reminding you that your work is missing, your work is missing. Now that role is intolerable for us, to be a secretary of the students and remind them to do the work time and again. So I hope today we told in the morning that you complete and then only go out of the class. We told everybody that don't leave the class before completing the work. Timestamp and evaluation. Do it here only. Once you will go out, you will be out. કે તમે ભૂલી જશો કે તમે અંગ્રેજી ભવનમાં ભણો છો. અહીંથી બહાર નીકળ્યા ભેગું જ ભૂલાઈ જશે કે યુ આર સ્ટડીંગ. પછી કાલ સવારે જ યાદ આવશે. પછી ત્યારે યાદ આવશે કે ટોપિક આપવાનો છે, આ બાકી છે, પેલું કામ બાકી છે. So today remember everybody, before you leave, complete the work, then only you leave the classroom. Don't leave without completing the work. Okay, so we'll start with the first presentation. Nirali, you can start. Eight, at the 8th minute, at the completion of 8th minute, ring a bell, and then you have to, if you complete before that is good. Otherwise, then you have to jump down to conclusion. So within half a minute or 1 minute, you have to conclude your presentation.
So good afternoon, everyone. I am NIRALI VAGHELA. Today I am going to deal with decolonization in the wretched of the earth. So here is my academic information. Research question. How does Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth expand the idea of decolonization beyond politics to psychological, economic and cultural dimension? Hypothesis. Fanon argues true decolonization demands psychological healing, cultural renewal, and economic justice, transferring oppressed people into liberated individuals capable of creating a just human post-colonial world. So I am agreeing with the idea of Fanon that decolonization need psychological healing, cultural renewal, and economic justice. Here is a table of content. What is decolonization? So to know what is decolonization, we need to know what is colonialism. So colonialism means when some country control other country with their power, and countries, European countries like Spain, Portugal, France, Netherlands, and England, they rule over Africa, Asia, and America. That is called colonialism. While decolonialism means when those countries get independence or freedom from those countries who are had power over them. So Asia and Africa become free between the 1940s and 1990s, ending century of European colonial rule, destruction and process. Psychological. Colonialism damaged the natives' minds. So colonial people, how they rule over the people, and they psychologically disturb the people of the natives. Societal revolt grow from spontaneous violence. Political. The native elite often betrayed through liberation. Native elite people don't support the common people from their country, so they kind of betray their own people. Cultural, a native culture must be reborn. So Fanon said that the people need to be more native cultural toward their own country rather than following Western thoughts or idea. The liberation force of violation. Fanon say colonialism itself is violent. Therefore, liberation also begins through violence. Violence breaks psychological chain and restores self-respect. Then it prevents people from being deceived by corrupt leaders. However, he warns that violence must later be disciplined and turned toward building the nation. Otherwise it remains destructive. So Fanon said that people need to be violent in some extent, because if they will be more violent, then there will be no end of the war. The world will be always be in war if they all are violent. The Wretched of the Earth is a political manifesto. This written in 1961. While Fanon was dying, the book was his revolutionary testament. Its call to arm not just analysis. Influenced by Marxists and existentialists with preface by Jean-Paul Sartre, inspired movements worldwide from African nationality to the Black Panther, showing its global political impact. Then the rejection of the Europe. Fanon condemns Europe for dehumanizing people through exploiting and war. He urged the third world not to imitate Europe but to create a new humanism, a new man. This marks a spiritual and cultural break from the West and hopeful beginning for the global renewals. So Fanon tried to tell people that they need to reject all European things like cultural, their idea, their education. All those things need to be removed from their African country, and they need to teach their own people their native language, education, or native culture. Here is a quote by Fanon. Let us decide not to imitate Europe. Let us combine our muscle and our brain in a new direction. Let us try to create the whole man whom Europe has been incapable of bringing to triumphant birth. Third world is called to start a new history of man and set afoot a new man. Then decolonization, a brief history of the world. Originally, decolonization meant gaining political independence. Later, scholars expand it to include economic, cultural, and psychological liberation. It symbolizes rejecting the entire civilization of the white man and negotiating new power relation between colonized and colonized. Then, extending the scope beyond political independence. Violence as a therapy, cleanless colonial fear and creates dignity. Economic, war against neo-colonialism where nations stay exploit economically. Cultural, true freedom require reclaiming language, education, and native identity. So Fanon said that after getting independence, people still are colonized by because the politics of their native people are some kind of affected by the colonial or the Western country because in government too Western people also try to be part of our own politics. That's what Fanon are trying to say. Cultural argument. The biggest weapon wielded by imperialism is the cultural bomb. The mind had to be decolonized through reforming education, literature, prioritizing the people's native language and cultural system. So I am in here. I am disagreeing with idea of Fanon about accepting our own native language and cultural system because uh, we have to be we need to learn the other people's culture, their education, literature, so we can develop ourselves too. But if we stuck down to only our native culture and narrow down our mind, then we can't learn more things from the other country or place too. French Fanon imperialism and the search for decolonization in the Europe. It highlights Fanon's view that Africa's independence remained incomplete because colonial structures survived. He justified anti-colonial violence as a necessary remedy to destroy those systems and achieve genuine transformation. So Fanon tried to tell his people that Africa need to be decolonized from the thought of Western uh, idea, politics, religion. They need to be decolonized from all those things. Fanon's critique of self-other relation. Uh, it it links to his earlier book Skin White Man's Fanon study how colonialism distorts self-image. The colonial see himself through the colonizer's eyes. He exposed psychological alliance and promotes radical humanism, relation built on a sequence, not to dominance. Then contemporary relevance and legacy. Fanon's enduring call to action, global divide. So in our contemporary time, we can learn from Fanon that how history was and what colonialism did to all the colonized people. So we can learn this from the Fanon. Then conclusion. Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth powerfully exposed colonialism psychologically, politically, and cultural violence while urging revolutionary transformation through decolonization. He argues demands not only political freedom but also economic justice and cultural renewal. This is my references and thank you. Do you have any question?
So, Nirali, my question is, in what ways does Fanon link decolonization to the creation of a new humanization?
So, in Fanon's perspective, decolonization is not just mean independence and freedom, but Fanon said that they need to regain their own identity, self-respect, and identity, all those things, and with that they can become more developed, and with that they can make their own new humanism, and with that they can provide more justice and equalities. Any other?
So, could you please more elaborate on how do Fanon and Edward Said approach the intellectual's role in resisting colonial domination?
So, in Fanon's perspective, intellectual and people's role is to combine people and get support and get help from those people. But Edward said perspective about intellectual people's role is that he said that people need to be more true, so that that will help people to don't get harmed by culture and politics. So this is from my side. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, my presentation topic is Fanon legacy in contemporary liberation movement. This is my personal information, table of content. And my research question is how have French Fanon ideas on decolonization, violence, and psychological liberation influence contemporary social justice and liberation movement around the world? And my hypothesis is French Fanon theories continues to shape modern liberation movement by providing both a framework for understanding systematic oppression and practical strategy for reclaim dignity, fostering solidarity, and promoting social justice. Historical context. Fred Fanon was a thinker and a psychiatrist from Marketing who get deeply involved in the fight against colonialism in Algeria. He was influenced by N.M. Caesar ideas of negritude, which celebrated black identity, and by philosopher like Jean-Paul Sartre. Fanon wasn't just a book or a smart guy. He actually lived the struggle of colonized people. He saw how colonialism hurt people's mind and spirit, and he used both his medical knowledge and his political activism to fight for freedom. Learning about him help us to see how personal experience and big ideas can come together to inspire real change, violence, and liberation. Fanon believed that colonialism was built and maintained throughout violence, which means that struggle for freedom sometimes had to use violence as well. His idea shaped a real struggle like the Algeria fight for independence, and later inspired groups around the world, like the Black Panther in the US and Palestinian fighter. For Fanon, violence wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaim dignity and freedom. Fanon utopian vision. Fred Fanon wanted more than just kicking out colonizers. He believed real freedom meant building a new society. Independence only changed who was in power, but not the deeper structure. Then operation would continue in different norms. His vision went to beyond the nationalism or just getting rid of colonial power. He imagined a world where humans could rebuild themselves and society with justice, equality, and shared humanity, a mix of psychology, politics, and culture are working together. The inner violence of colonized and struggle for self-recognition. Fred Fanon argued that colonialism itself is a deeply violent system, not only throughout military domination of, but also throughout the psychological harm it inflict on the colonized mind. In Black Skin, White Mask, he described how racism become epidermalized, meaning that feeling of inferiority sink into one's very sense of self. This inner violence forces the oppressed to measure themselves by a white standard to and to live in a constant conflict with their own identity. Fanon believes that breaking free from this cycle requires a radical act of resistance. And European that restore self-worth and human wellness. Psychological liberation. For Fanon, true freedom could not be achieved without political and independence alone. It demands a psychological revolution. Colonial operation that entered the body and consciousness of black people, shaping how they thought, imagined, and even move in the world. Liberation therefore meant healing the colonized mind, freeing imagination, rebuilding self-confidence, and rejecting the myth of white superiority. Fanon and neoliberal crisis. Fanon warned about leaders who take power that after independence, but don't really help the people. Today, we can see similar problem with a corrupt, alien, failed government and rising inequality. Fanon idea also help us understand the challenge of modern global economy. For Fanon, real freedom had to go beyond politics. It required justice, fairness, and economic equality, where people could live with dignity and access the resource they needed to thrive. Fanon global relevance today. Fanon ideas continue to matter across the world because the struggle he wrote about have not disappeared. Modern movement like Black Lives Matter, indigenous right campaign, and anti-Australian protests. In India also we saw Dalit, Adivasi, and a farmer doing this kind of movement. Fanon help us understand why this struggle keep happening, even when political independence is achieved. Fanon also imagine a world shaped by universal humanism. Conclusion. Fred Fanon legacy in more than just a chapter in history. It's continue to serve as a guide for understanding of the struggle of today. His writing connect a powerful theory with the urgency to a real world action, showing how idea about freedom, justice, equality can shape political and social movement. Fanon analysis of colonialism and its lasting effects still help us see why inequality, racism, and exploitation persist even in the modern world. It teaches us that liberation is not only about ending political control, but also about transforming society so that everyone can live with dignity. Even in the 21st century, Fanon's vision has not just lost his force. His work inspired a wide range of movements. So the fighting against racism, against global inequality, and against systems that put profit over people. From grassroots protest to intellectual debates, his idea continued to fuel effort to challenge oppression and build solidarity across borders. One of the most important questions we can ask today is how can Fanon call for a new humanism, guide a non-violent movement in our time? For Fanon, this new humanism meant creating a world where justice, compassion, and human dignity are at the central of life. His dream of a future built a solidarity rather than a domination still offer a powerful vision for remaining our societal today. This is my work citation, and thank you, everyone. If you have a question, feel free to ask.
So my question is, how would Fanon respond to non-violent movement like Gandhi's or Martin Luther King Jr.'s?
Fanon value non-violence, but sometimes we see some of colonizers have some of colonizers against violence or colonial rules against not working. This kind of thing, believing to liberation, sometime remaining confusion to reclaim humanity or dignity.
My question is, what relevance does Fanon's new humanism have for today's global world?
Fanon new humanism call for Fanon new humanism call for making a recall to making recall to making recall to sorry, sir. Sir, I am not able to give you answer.
So, hello everyone, myself ROZMIN. Today my presentation topic about the psychological problems in Indian crime throughout the lens of Pets Fanon, based on the witches of the earth and the black skin white mask. That is my personal information, table of content. So, my research question, how do Fanon's theories on psychological colonization explain mental operations and the crime in modern India? Hypothesis, even after a political freedom, Indians suffer a psychological colonization throughout the colorism, language shape, and the economic subject. Introduction, why Fanon for India? So, you know that the Fanon was known as a psychiatrist, philosopher, and anti-colonial thesis. His key works like The Witches of the Earth in 1961 and The Black Skin, White Mask, published in 1952, explore how a colonial rule damaged the species of the colonized. Relevance of the India even after independence. We know that even after independence, India faced the mental colonization, shape identity, and the violence. Psychological roots of Indian crime reflect the colonial trauma and self-aliveness. So, theoretical frameworks in a psychological colonization. So, is the Fanon's idea that liberation must free both land as a mind. So, as a psychologically perspective, like the colonized adapt the colonizers value leading inferiority and dependency and limitation. So, as an Indian perspective, we see that mental submissions show continue throughout the colonialism, language hierarchies, and the Western identity. From a colonial violence to a psychological crime, as a violence transform from a physical dominion as well as a mental subjection. So, a crime in today's crime reflect the internalized anger, shape, and revolt. Fanon, so as a Fanon operations show as a trauma invade mind that cannot fight external figure or itself. In India, social violence mirrored as a psychological imbalance. Internalized oppression in Indian society. That topic inspired by a black skin white mask given by a Fanon. So as Fanon say that colonialism as colonialism show a fair skin as a superior and the colonial as a colonial beauty as a hangover. Linguistic shape that English as a status and the local language as an inferiority lead to the depression, anxiety, and land helplessness. Neo-colonial India, economic explorations and the mental distress. So as a political corporation, political corporation connect the continuation of the social colonial exploration. So as a, for example, in our India, farmer suicide, labor straight and unemployment show a psychological background. Economical dependence, like economical dependence show a new form of mental slaveries. Operations and the mental health. Fanon's psychiatric research in Algeria, they show some of the themes, same themes in all the peoples like trauma, neurosis, and alliances. In our Indian perspective, we see the discriminations, right, and the caste gender operations in a colonial psychological pain, ignoring a trauma like a psychological crime continue to colonial violence. Resistance and the rebirth toward the mental decolonization. As a Fanon solution, Fanon gives the solution like reclaim a mental freedom throughout the identity, language, and a culture. In our Indian also give solutions like promote a mental health awareness, respect the indigenous identity, and reform the education as a decolonized throughout. So is a highlighted line like the new man is not born of politics alone, but of inner renewal. My learning outcomes like understand Fanon's psychological theories and their application of post-colonial India connected to crime, trauma, and identity throughout the lens of psychological colonization. Recognize the how psychological violence can manifest as a social crime, corporation as a self-hate. Reflect on the importance of the mental health awareness and decolonizes education in the achieve through independence. So my conclusion that a finance center message emphasized that true liberation begin in the mind and not merely throughout the political independence of the institutional change. So as and they say the crime, equality, and the social confederacy as the post-colonial India reflect the deep psychological wound left by colonial dominations. They highlight these words like equality, like awareness, education, and mental decolonization, allowing an individual and a social free theme slaves for the inheritance mental chain. Only when the mind is liberated can an Indian achieve authentic justice, equality, and human dignity. So that is my reference. Thank you. Do you have any question?
So my question is, according to Fanon, what is required for true liberation in a post-colonial society?
True liberation connect the mentally as well as a political. In our Indians, some of the problems like farmer suicide and unemployment show the people mental conditions, and that why a post-colonial society give some of the solutions like some of the solutions. Throughout the educations and also a mental health awareness.
ROZMIN, my question is, how does modern neocolonialism affect mental health in India?
So modern neocolonialism affect the mental health in India as we see farmer face economically depressed, and they go to the suicide, and we see that some of the student and other people go to the as a face unemployment in their life, and they go to the suicide. That time that is neocolonialism effect as a mental health in our India. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. So today I'm going to present Rewriting Empire, Rhys, White Sargasso Sea as a post-colonial feminist response to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. So these are my personal information, table of contents, and my research questions. That how does Rhys, White Sargasso Sea reclaim the silenced voice of Bronte's Bertha Mason by transforming her into Antoinette Coetzee, and in what ways does this act of rewriting expose the intersection of gender, race, and empire that underpin Jane Eyre's feminist narrative? And to what extent does White Sargasso Sea succeed and simultaneously struggle to challenge the imperial and patriarchal ideologies of Jane Eyre? And considering Greece's own white Creole positionality and her representation of Black Caribbean characters and her use of fragmented narrative form. So my hypothesis is that this research hypothesis that Jean Rhys White Sargasso Sea function as both a post-colonial and feminist counter discourse that reclaims the silence that made women in the attic as a complex subject shaped by colonial history and gendered oppression. That by granting Antoinette Coetzee narrative consciousness, Rhys exposes the imperial foundation of Bronte's feminist voice and redefine madness as a product of displacement and patriarchal violence rather than moral failure. And however, the novel's resistance is not ambiguous. Rhys' position as a white Creole writer and her marginalization of black female character reveal that even a text of resistance remain entangled in the hierarchies it critiques. Thus, White Sargasso Sea similarly deconstructs the imperial feminism of Jane Eyre and acknowledges the impossibility of a wholly liberated female voice within a post-colonial framework still haunted by empire. So first we have introduction that Jean Rhys White Sargasso Sea rewrites Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre as a post-colonial feminist critique of both empire and patriarchy. So Rhys reclaim her as a Antoinette Coetzee, a Creole woman with memory, emotion, and identity, and shows that madness arises not from innate voice, but from colonial displacement and patriarchal cruelty. And here critics like Haidt and Lancer that argues that Bronte's feminism depends on silencing the racialized other. And Haidt exposes the governance narrator's authority as a fictively female, while Lancer showed that Jane's empowered voice is sustained by Bertha's muteness, proving that gender difference is not different enough. And Rhys reverses this logic that centering the Caribbean as the true locus of narrative and moral authority. So here, Howell noticed that Rhee's position as a white Creole complicates her post-colonial stance, and her fiction both critiques and inherits colonial hierarchies. So first point is that the mad woman speaks, giving voice to the silenced. In Bronte's Bertha, we can see that in Jane Eyre, that Bertha Mason serve as a crucial structural function, and she must be simultaneously inhuman. That to justify her confinement and morally culpable. So it is to validate Rochester's desire to remarry. And here, Rhee's intervention. Antoinette's subjectivity, that Rhys transforms Bertha from a cardboard figure into Antoinette's causeway, providing her with her childhood memories, emotional interiority, and a Caribbean culture identity that challenges European definition of sanity and femininity. And here we can see critical scholarly position. So in the novel, it hides notice that exposes the authority of these earlier governess narrators as only fictively female and singular as a occupying the ideological position of men, and reveals that how narrative conventions that confine and finally eradicate Bertha are at the same time way of bringing a rebellious female protagonist back into the patriarchal fold. And next is the problem of female anger and madness. So in here Bertha is a uncontrolled voice. So in Jane Eyre we can see that Bertha's uncontrollable voice, which insists on being heard even when her body is shackled, and is the frame that makes safe chance outspokenness and reveals it as a ultimately unthreatening to the social order. And here Rhys reflect a reclamation is that in White Sargasso Sea, the wife turns to her cousin after her husband has copulated loudly with her own maid in the adjoining room. So it recontextualizing behavior that Bronte represent as an inherent vice. And third one is colonial violence and racialized femininity. So in that the imperial logic of Jane Eyre. So in Bronte's novel, we can see that Bertha's Creole identity becomes conflated with madness and moral degeneracy. She represents tropical excesses and uncontrolled sexuality and racial contamination. So in Rhys post-colonial critique, we can see so White Sargasso Sea reveals the culpability of Rochester's first wife as a function of narrative conventions. And this woman behaves as if she must in order to bring about a euphoric conclusion to a sequence of events solely marginal to her own story. So here we can see reversal of causation. So in Rhee's version, madness becomes the consequences of the wife's being cast out rather than a cause, and the unchastity of Rhys for protagonist is the consequences rather than the cause of her husband's colossiousness and infidelity. And fourth one, the fire, deconstruction or liberation. So in Bronte's version, we can see that in Jane Eyre, that Bertha's burning of Thornfield is presented as so first is final proof of her dangerous madness, and then tragic deconstruction requiring Rochester's heroic intervention, and third is necessary clearing of obstacles to Jane's happiness. And in Rhys reinterpretation, in this we can find that ending becomes a very celebration where Antoinette embracing her role as an intermediary and between cultures performs the only kind of heroic gesture available to women. So here the Caribbean is an absent presence. So here we can see that White Sargasso sees geographical politics also, that in the novel makes visible how for Antoinette it is England that is unreal, a cold dark dream. And while for this woman England is necessarily a fiction. So in Bronte's fiction and the cardboard house that contains her soul completely is already written account of her destiny. This is the narrative authority and the politics of voice. So here I agree with this point that the novel's feminism is compromised by its imperialism, and authoritative voice in Jane Eyre is even more perverted. Then critical evaluation of this argument and complication. So here Gayatri Spivak argues that we must read Jane Eyre as an allegory of the general epistemic violence of imperialism, a construction of self-immolity and a colonial subject for the glorification of the social mission of the colonizer. So this here I put further reading for the this topic. In conclusion, that Rhys by Sargasso transforms Bertha's madness into historical system of empire, and exposing how Bronte's feminist narrative relied on racial and colonial silencing. So this is conclusion, and these are the references. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Shruti, my question is, in what way does Rhys invert the center periphery dynamic between Europe and the Caribbean?
Yes, here we can see Rochester as a European authority and is aligned in the Caribbean. So, and here Antoinette rooted locally, and it asserts cultural agency and also reversing colonial hierarchy. In today's time, we can see that migration and diasporic literature also explores similar north-south power dynamics. So that is the question of answer of that.
My question: does Jane raise a fragment from a challenge or a reinforce a stereotypes of a female haters?
Okay. Here, Rhys dreamlike non-linear storytelling that challenges patriarchal control, but can be this mistaken for hysteria. And here, this reflects Antoinette's state that her voice shows both freedom and as well as the collapse. And here we can see that that unstable from highlights that how women's emotions are often unfairly labeled as abnormal. So that is the answer. Thank you so much. This is from my side.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today's presentation topic is colonial sea shadow, race, gender, power in Jane Reyes white surrogacies. This is a personal information table of content. Research question: how does Jane Reyes white surrogacies portray female madness as the response to colonial and patriarchal oppression, and what does this reveal about the interactions of race, gender, and power in post-colonial literature? Hypothesis: Jane Reyes white surrogacies suggest that female madness is not a personal feeling but a political consequence of the colonial and patriarchal domination through the Antoinette's psychological unraveling, the novel critiques and the erasures of the Creole identity and female the agencies of a revealing madness as a form of a resistance against the systematic silencing. Introduction: unveiling the colonial sea shadow. Chen raises white surrogacies remains The silent story of the monsoon from a Eyre, placing it within a post-colonial and feminist framework seat in the Caribbean. The novel explores how colonialism and the patriarchal shape identity, madness, and power through the Antonity's fragmented voice and the Christophones, the resistance rise, critics, and the azure of the Creole woman, and the challenges dominate Western narratives. First is the mapping the surrogacies, historical and the geopolitical landscape. The set against the backdrop of the colonial Jamaica white surrogacies explore the historical and the geopolitical tensions that have shaped the Creole identity in the emancipation of the Caribbean. Jane Rhys situated her characters within the fractured society, still human by the legacy of slavery, where the racial hierarchies and the land ownerships define power. Antonity's ambiguous position as the white Creole woman reflect the instability of the identity in a world where colonial privilege in the eroding yet racial prejudice persist through the landscape. Rise expose the deep scares of empire, economic displacement, culture alienation, and the violent inheritance of the colonial rule. Race and resistance, Creole womanhood, and the racialized othering. In white surrogacies, the genres explore the realize the other of the Creole womanhood throughout the contrasting figure of the Antoinette of the Christophian. Antoinette is raising the ambiguity being the white yet culturally Creole readers and the nearable to both the colonial rejection to the particle control her identity in the constantly question, living her isolated in a society. The refuse to accept the hybridity in the contrast, Christophian, a black servant, and the practication of the obey, the embodies and the subversive agency. She resists colonial norms through the spiritual autonomy and direct the defiance of the rockster authority. Together, see women reveal how race and resistance interest in a colonial world that seek to silence and control female voice, gender silence, patriarchy, madness, and the colonial gaze. In the surrogacies chain, Rhys explore how patriarchal and colonial forces silence women and construct their madness. Antoinette's designs into the anxiety is not a portrait, a personal application, but as a result of a systemic assured her voice and dismissed her identity, overwritten her and her autonomy defined by both colonial society and her rockster. The novel critique the colonial gaze, the exotize the pathologies Creole woman, and the reducing them to objects that of fear or desire. Throughout the fragmentation narration of emotional isolation, Rhys reveals how power operates through language and silence, turning madness into a metaphor of a resistance and lose. Power and position, empire, erotics, and the economical control. The white surrogacies, the Jane Rhys expose how colonial power operates throughout intimate and the economical control, patriarchally in the institution of the marriage. Antoinette's union of the Rochester in not rooted her body, land, and identity as are observed into the imperial authority. The novel critique how women, especially Creole women, are commodified within the colonial structures, treated as the extraction of the poetry rather than autonomous, brings erotic desire in the integral with a concept. The position becomes both literary and symbolic. Throughout the length, Rhys reveal how empires sustain itself by margining economic exploration and the gender demonization, narrative fragmentation, language, voice, and epistemic violence. Chain-rise white surrogacies employs narrative fragmentation and polyphony to expose the epistemic violence embedded in a colonial storytelling. His shift between the Antonides and the Rochers preservative the novel destabilized and the authority of a single dominant voice, and the reveal how language can be used to silence and distort of the Earth's marginalized experience. Autonate's fragmented narration reflect her psychological distinction and the border culture discolation of the face of the Creole woman and Manuel Rochers. A voice imposed the colonial logic, often misinterpreting or overwinning Antonides' realities. Through this structure, rise the critic of the politics of the storytelling and asserts the needs to multiple resist a voice in a post-colonial literature. Conclusion: shadow that speak. Genre's white surrogacies close not within the resolution but with the reputure, inviting readers to comfort from the silence left by the colonial and the patriarchal histories throughout the Antonides' fragmented voice and the Christophone's resistance, and the novel reclaim the narratives that were historically erased of the distorted madness, exile of the spiritual defines become a tools of the protest against imperial control in illuminating this a shadow raise not only the critic of the past but a gesture toward decolonial futures where storytelling become an act of a survival and where marginalized voice speak back to a power with the clarity, agency, and imagination. These are my reference. Thank you. Any question?
Actually, my question is for you that how does Rhys use narrative fragmentation to reflect epistemic violence?
Chain rays show powerful people and powerful people and sorry sir.
Satakshi, my question: how does white Sargasso Sea reclaim a silence history and imaging a decolonial futures?
These stories see how hidden pain and the future and the image is a future uh, where see. Sorry, sir. So thank you.
So, hello everyone. Today I am going to deal with post-colonial studies beyond the ethic, feminist, and post-colonial narratives in white Sargasso Sea. So, um, here I want to convey that how white Sargasso Sea is powerful and successful novel that works as a counter discursive work. Discursive text, and this means it writes back against the dominant story of Jane Eyre. So these are my academic informations, table of contents, and a research question that how does Rhys's white Sargasso Sea function as a successful counter-discursive text that dismantles the foundational ideological framework of the British imperial and patriarchal archive established by Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. So, with a hypothesis, white Sargasso Sea successfully challenges the authority of Victorian canon by synthesizing feminist critique with post-colonial discourse, effectively demonstrating that the economic and narrative imprisonment of Antoinette, later on Bertha Mason, is a necessary ideological precondition for the perceived liberation and ethical triumph of the English feminist subject Jane Eyre. So here my goal is to show that how Jean Rhys uses her narrative to dismantle this whole system through these arguments of different critics. So first is the intertextuality, exposing the archival lie. So revisionist disobedience. So Rhys is being deliberately disobedient to the original text Jane Eyre. She is not just adding a prequel, but she is challenging the canonical text itself and exposing ideological constructs. So by putting the maid woman at the center, Antoinette, Rhys makes it impossible us to ignore her character, and she exposes the idea of Bertha as a crazy, as just a narrative tool used by the British. Then the narrative imperative. So the text focus on reverse reading and it suggests us to read a story reversal in a reversal manner, and we realize that Jane's liberation is literally dependent on a colonial woman being silenced and locked up in attic and challenging the Englishness. So this is a post-colonial point. Rhys argues that the very idea of pure English identity is unstable because it relies on controlling and marginalizing people in the colonies. Next, the post-colonialism, deconstructing colonial binaries. So first is constructing oppositions. So Antoinette is always caught in the middle, neither fully black nor fully white, or not fully English, not Creole, and this in-between status successfully breaks down the rigid, simple categories of colonial thinking. Then colonial fragmentation. So the novel successfully subverts the progressive narrative of history by demonstrating that post-emancipation freedom brings new repressive social controls, supporting an anti-enlightenment critique of European rationalism and liberalism. Then the power of naming. So after Antoinette shift from that massacre to London, that time Rochester give her name Bertha. So this act of we can say it as a act of violence. Rochester renaming her Bertha as it is a symbolic act of slave branding, we can say, and he claiming ownership and erasing her identity under English law. Then feminist critique, law, property, and agency. So marriage is a colonial rule. So here Rhys proves that marriage is not about love, but it is a legal contract for property transfer. And Antoinette's body and her family's money are simply assets being transferred to an Englishman. We have already seen in a novel that after marrying with Antoinette, Rochester gets her property. Then the subversive landscape. So the wild and uncontrollable Caribbean gardens contrast with the structured English garden, and the wild nature resists the patriarchal desire to own and organize, just like Antoinette's spirit. And then reclaiming agency by fire. So the fire reverses the historical pattern of persecuting and silencing women. Instead of being consumed quietly, she uses the fire to assert her presence and selfhood. In the final act, we seen that she anyhow tries to escape from that, but later on she realizes that she is holding fire and she is burning things. And ethical success, voice and the subaltern. So acknowledging complexity, we must be critical here that some scholars argue Rhys risked prioritizing the white woman pain over the black woman's, potentially ignoring the voice of a subaltern. And defense of the attempt. However, we defend Rhys that Christophine is essential. She offers a crucial speaking position for the colonized, and she is real and powerful character of here. Then necessary conflict. So the ambiguity in her character is not a flaw in the novel. It is a realistic picture of the complicated, messy, and conflicts over race and meaning in the colony. Then contemporary relevance, enduring critics, hybridity and migration. So Antoinette's feeling of never belonging is a blueprint for today's conversation about migration, diaspora, and hybrid identity. Systematic critique. So Rhys's critique of liberalism is very current. It shows that even when laws change, the system of control, patriarchy, and empire can still be in a place. Then the politics of naming. The we already discussed that Rochester gave Antoinette a new name, Bertha Mason, and it is we can consider also a modern issue. And like microaggressions, the power of the dominant group to define who you are, and ethical storytelling. So the debates over Christophine is the same debate we have today about the tokenism and allyship in movies and books. We gets to who good gets to tell whose story. And in the end, in conclusion, through its radical intertextuality, its a successful deconstruction of colonial binaries, and its powerful synthesis of feminist and anti-imperialism imperial concerns, White Sargasso Sea is a definitive and necessary literary text. It successfully changes the very ideological foundation upon which the Victorian novel and the British Empire were built by revealing the colonial woman's silencing to be a prerequisite for the celebrated domesticity and ethical selfhood of the English heroine. The novel's enduring power lies in its persistent exposure of how patriarchy and imperialism are fundamentally inseparable system of control. So my learning outcome is that now I can confidently analyze and defend how White Sargasso Sea functions as a definitive counter-discursive text that dismantles the established Western literary canon, and integrate feminist and post-colonial theories to analyze how patriarchal controls operates as a direct extension of imperial controls. and I can critically evaluate the nuanced and persistent debate regarding the representation of the subaltern and argue for the novel's significance as an essential ethical intervention. So these are my references, and thank you. If anyone have question, please feel free to ask.
My question is for you that some critics says that Rhys focuses too much on the white Creole woman and ignores black voices. So how do you respond on that?
Yes, we can see that Rhys tries to tell story of Antoinette, and some critics says that Christophine, the black woman, is ignored. But I, in my point of view, that she had a portrayal of she is. Very good to describe of a character of Christophine, that she knows Obeah, which is known European tradition, and we have seen that colonized people are also afraid to spoke a single word against of Christophine. So that is.
So, Srushti, my question for you: how is white surrogacy still relevant to today's world?
So we have already discussed that identity, migration, and diaspora. So sometimes in in a contemporary world, many children are belongs to that family that their parents had interreligion or intercaste marriage. So they are not fully one particular. They cannot belong from one particular religion or caste. So that is from my side. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. My today's topic name is From Empire to Globalization, reading Coetzee's Foe as a Post-Colonial Allegory. Academic information, table of contents. So my research question is, how does J.M. Coetzee's Foe allegorically represent the transition from colonial to globalized form of narrative control, and in what ways does it expose the persistence of imperial hierarchies within a modern publishing and authorship? And my hypothesis is Coetzee's Foe serves as a post-colonial allegory that critiques the transformation of imperial domination into a globalized system of representation. Through the silencing of Friday and the mediation of the Susan Barton's narrative by Daniel Foe, Coetzee demonstrates how colonial hierarchies of voice and authorship survive within the structures of a global literary production, echoing Spivak's subaltern silence, Fanon's systematic oppression, Nagushi's linguistic colonization, and Hugin's post-colonial exotic, shaped by Western markets. So, in introduction, this presentation examines J.M. Coetzee's Foe as a lens to understand the transition from empire to globalization in narrative power. Coetzee critiques how colonial authority controlled storytelling, language, and representation, and shows that in the modern globalized world, similar hierarchies persist through publishing, media, and culture institutes. The discussion follow a structured framework, starting within the historical and literary context of Foe, moving to a key concept such as a post-colonial allegory, authorship, and representation, and then analyzing the novel's allegorical critique of empire and its relation to a globalization. So in context and literary background, so for 1986 revisits the Defoe's Robinson Crusoe 1790, explores the narrative authority. So who tells the story, whose perspective is silence. So here Friday is a silent character. A context, late 20th century post-colonial literature, apartheid era South Africa. And Coetzee's work highlights the resistance of power hierarchies in a storytelling, emphasizing that the legacies of empire continue to shape whose voice are heard and whose remain marginalized. So, in a key concept, Info Coetzee explores the post-colonial allegory, showing how colonial power continues to shape narratives, the struggle over authorship and representation in a scene in Susan Barton's attempt to tell her story. So in the story we find that Susan Barton is how she attempts to tell her story and tell to a foe to publish her story, but he denied. And Daniel Foe's control and Friday's silence presence. The novel also critiques the global publishing, revealing how modern literary markets echoes colonial hierarchies. Overall, it demonstrates the strategy to decolonize the narrative by giving a voice, symbolically or directly, to those historical marginalized. Coetzee's allegory. So, Friday is a subaltern. So, Friday is a silence yet a central. Island is a microcosm of control and narrative power. So, a microcosm means something is a small example of something is a larger. Island is a microcosm of control and narrative power. Barton attempts to reclaim a narrative agency reflecting a marginalized author's struggles, so that empire's control narrative is symbolically represented in the story. From empire to globalization, so empire, so Crusoe's Defoe, a control through a colonization, ownership, and a storytelling. In a globalization, so publishing, media, cultural industries, new form of narrative dominance. Four shows that narrative hierarchies evolve but continue to suppress marginalized voice. So in empire, we find that colonizers just not control a land, but they also control a story, literature, and also control whose voice are heard or whose voice are not heard, marginalized. Theoretical connection. So Frantz Fanon, who says that because it is a systematic negation of the other person and a furious determination to deny the other person all attributes of humanity. So Fanon underscores how colonialism systematically dehumanize the colonized, stripping them of their identity and humanity. In four, Friday's silence and marginalization reflect this dehumanization, illustrating the enduring impact of colonial oppression. In Homike Bhabha's perspective, the theoretical recognition of the split space of enunciation may open the way to conceptualizing and international culture based not on the exoticism of multiculturalism or the diversity of cultures, but on the inscription and the articulation of cultures hybridity. So Bhabha introduced the concept of hybridity, where cultures merge and create a new identity. Info, the interaction between the different characters and cultures illustrate this hybridization, challenging a fixed culture boundaries. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, the subaltern cannot speak. There is no virtue in global laundry, leads with woman as a pious theme. So in Spivak argues that the subaltern, particularly women in colonized societies, cannot truly speak within the structure of power that define them. In Foe, Susan Barton's attempt to tell her story are mediated by Daniel Foe, highlighting the challenges of representing marginalized voice. Nagusheva Thiongo, language has a dual characters. It is a both means a communication and a carrier of culture. So Nagushia Thiongo underscores the role of language in shaping and transmitting culture. In a Foe, the use of English and silencing of indigenous languages reflect the cultural dominance and ensure imposed by colonial powers. In a modern relevance, we find that Coetzee's 4 remains relevant today as it mirrors how global media and publishing still favor dominant voices. The novel warns that even after colonialism, control continuous through a language, culture, and industry. Language carries a power, and Hugan shows how post-colonial writing is shaped by Western markets. Together, they reveal how Foe anticipated modern struggle and marginalized author in a globalized world. Here is my references. Thank you. Now you are free to ask questions.
So my question for you, what post-colonial ideas help us understand foe in the context of a modern global power structures?
Thinkers like Nagusheva Thiong'o, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, and Hugan, we find that their articles and their thinking help us to understand a foe. In a foe, we find that old and new control both are we find in a foe. So how in globalization world, powerful countries and big companies are controlled poorer countries and marginalized people.
Question is, how does silence like Friday's info related to the way marginalized groups are treated in today's global media?
Friday's silence is a show that some people's voices are not heard, not because of they are silent, but because of they are controlled by a powerful groups, and they are controlled that whose word and whose voices are important. So in a global media, we find also that in globalization world, powerful countries and global media are controlled poorer countries, and they are neglected their voice. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mansi Joshi. So my today's topic is reading ethically the moral impact of Coetzee's narrative. Here is my academic details, table of content, introduction. So, philosophical engagement with literature. So, in Coetzee's novel are read not just as the stories, but as the texts that raise big philosophical and ethical questions. So, ethical reading as the active progress. So, in this reading, his works requires active involvement, where readers must face difficult truths and moral uncertainties. So, literature as an event. So, reading is seen as a powerful event that can transform the reader and provoking self-reflection and ethical awareness. So, if people read these texts of Coetzee, so people will also find some new question what are going in word, and the people also can get some answers, and they also feel some questions for this word. Here is my research question. How do J.M. Coetzee's novel, through their narrative style, character complexity, and ethical concerns, engage readers in moral reflection and shape their understanding of literature as a site of ethical inquiry? Hypothesis. Coexist works by employing complex narrative techniques, multifaceted characters, and ethically challenging situations, compel readers to confront moral dilemmas, fostering deeper ethical engagement and
enhancing the perception of literature as a morally significant practice. So the ethic of reading Coetzee. So here is three frameworks. So I put this from Falcott's article. So in this, central claim is that Coetzee's novel demand an ethical reading. So one that is not passive but responsive and self-questioning. The idea of otherness means the reader must confront the unknowable or marginalized, not simply them to familiar categories. So, Coetzee's strategy, Diary of Bad Years as a case study. So, this novel is basically written in 3 stages. So, he not only mix the fictional elements, but he also talk about some ethical points. And this novel is mixture of political essay, philosophical reflection, as well as the personal information and the personal feelings. So in this, he shows that Coetzee's abstract ethical ambition are grounded in aesthetic techniques. So the triadic structure is a deliberate strategies. So it resists as a reconciliation of completing voices. So the concept of dialectic or responsibilities means readers can't remain neutral. So the novel positions them to question their own morals. So info, the story of silence. So its overview and the context. So this slide is gives us the audience a basic entry point. So the article explores how Foe treats silence. So voice silence, why the silence, and what that reveals about power, narrative, and voice. So, for example, silence might means imposed muteness or marginalized character. So, the author Williams, this article's author is the Williams. It shows that Foe within post-colonial discourse. So it's the colonizer versus colonized. So voice versus marginality. So here in a major argument and its key insights. So these are likely the main claim of Williams' article is the point. Silence as the narrative strategy means that characters or narrators remain silent or mute in deliberate ways. Doing so affect how the story is told. For instance, in Foe, a character may be denied a speaking voice, thereby showing their marginal status. So the claim is the unsaid reveals more than what is spoken. It means that gaps, omissions, or what is left silent can carry meaning. Here we can find silence, but behind this silence we can find something, some meaning, some questions which are going in Friday's mind. So, so when a character does not answer, the reader must wonder why and what is withheld. Under localizes, the South African publishing context of Foe. So here publishing text means that everything surrounding the book beyond the text itself, such as the publisher's policies, censorship regimes, readership expectations, distribution networks, and political pressures. For instance, if a publisher feared state censorship or backlash, so they might require changes to the manuscript or delay the release in the certain regions. So here Zimber, who is the writer of this article, its project is somewhat metacritical, not just reading Foe as a text, but reading the conditions under which it was made visible or invisible. So this matter for literary scholars because it links the text to power. So revealing that meaning is not only in word, but it's the material and institutional constraints.
Here is the key argument and my personal observation. So, gatekeeping in this, that suppose a publisher choose not publish a scene that criticize the state too strongly, fearing legal troubles. That is a gatekeeping decision. And then local versus global pressure. A South African publisher might request removal or softening of politically sensitive content so that the book can sold locally. But the international publisher might want the provocative passages intent to boost critical reputations. The novel as ethical command in James Coetzee's 4. So, in this Marai's article, it argues that the island in 4 is not just a backdrop or a historical site, but the space that escape or stand outside historical determinism. So, this allows the writer in the novel to approach the other, as we can find that Susan Crusoe and Friday, without being constrained by historical narrative. So major argument is that autonomy, that Murray sees in for a possibility that literary writing can transcend historical constraints. So in conclusion, that Coetzee's novel make readers think about difficult moral issues. His way of writing combines story and ethics, giving readers a deep and meaningful experience. By reading his works, people can better understand the moral challenges and responsibilities of human life. So, as we found in the novel 4, that, and as well as I earlier mentioned in his other novel, Diary of Bad Years, as a case study, which was written in 2007. Here is my references. If any question, please feel free to ask.
So, Mansi, my question is in Coetzee's 4, how does silence function not merely as absence but as a form of a contestant narrative power within a post-colonial framework?
Yes, so here we can find in novel 4 that Friday is silent person, but there is some conversation between the Friday's silence and with the higher power people. This is the negotiation between the lower people's power and higher people's power. But it's showing that the silence Coetzee's foreground. Here we can found that Coetzee is absent by character in this novel, but mentally he is present with Friday's character. So here we can find the narrative gaps and limitation of voice.
So my question is, why does present silence as an ethical command rather than just a lack of speech?
So here we can find that silence is not empty. Some character forces to write this silence in paper, so people can find out that silence because of what. So this is makes writing an ethical act. So this is the mastery of Coetzee, that he put silence in his novel, but we can find out what's the purpose behind that. And it's not just storytelling, but it's as well the story of heart touching. Thank you.
So, hello everyone, myself Smruti Vader, and today I'm going to present on who controls the story for and contemporary concerns about misinformation and narrative manipulation. So, these are my academic information, table of contents, and my research question. So, my research question asks how do power dynamics of narrative control in FO illuminate contemporary struggles over truth and authority in the age of algorithmic misinformation? So my hypothesis is that the silencing mechanisms in FO operate analogously to what we see in today's digital platforms. So let me explain this through this table. So in FO, Daniel Fo's editorial control shapes what becomes the official narrative in our digital era. This role is taken by engineers who design algorithms that determine visibility online. And the second is Friday's physical mutilation and inability to speak parallels in contemporary era that how human designed systems drown out authentic voices today. Third is Susan Barton's lack of publishing authority reflects how algorithmic rules created by powerful tech elites deny amplification to certain groups. And the last is just as market demands influenced narratives in the 18th century, engagement metrics like shares and clicks now dictate which stories spread, usually privileging sensationalism over accuracy. So the argument I want to make from this is just as colonial gatekeepers once determined whose experience is counted as knowledge, algorithmic systems today decide whose truths gain visibility, and these systems disproportionately silence marginalized voices. Safia Noble, in her work, reminds us that mathematically formulations to drive automated decisions are made by human beings, and algorithms are not neutral. They embody the values, biases, and the profit motives of their creators. So this parallel between Fo's world of narrative manipulation and our present media ecosystem highlights how power, profit, and authority continue to shape what people believe is truth. So, introduction. Let us begin with a powerful parallel, like in Coetzee's 4, Susan Barton witnesses a colonial violence but cannot publish her story. She needs Daniel Fo's authority. And most tragically, Friday's tongue has been cut out, and he literally cannot speak his own history. Coetzee uses this as a metaphor for what Gayatri Spivak calls epistemic violence, and the systematic denial of marginalized groups' ability to produce knowledge about their own realities. So now in 2025, the World Economic Forum ranks misinformation as the number one global risk. So this concentration of narrative power yearly mirrors Daniel Fo's editorial monopoly, as Safia Noble warns us that artificial intelligence will become a major human rights issues in the 21st century, and these systems are designed by humans who, in Noble's words, holds all type of values, many of which openly promote racism, sexism, and false notions of meritocracy. So my central question becomes who controls the story then and even now? So for and colonial narrative control and the novel's power structure. So, in novel, Susan Barton is an authentic witness, but lacks cultural authority, and she must submit to Daniel Fo for publication, and her lived experience gets reshaped to fit marketable conventions. And Friday's silence, even more devastating, with he cannot with he can not narrate his enslavement by himself, and he becomes an object of author's speculation and never the subject of his own story. So Coetzee reveals how colonialism operates by controlling whose experiences count as truth, and physical violence parallels epistemic violence, the denial of narrative authority. Susan herself recognizes this when she asks who will accept a story in which the hero never speaks, and the market rejects unmarketable authenticity. So contemporary parallel of this and algorithmic misinformation. So only if we see the digital crisis of 2024 and 25, only 0.25% of ex-users create 73 to 78% of misinformation, and a small group has outsized narrative control, exactly mirroring how Daniel Foe's monopoly was working in the novel. So Meta controls 3.98 billion users, and Google controls information access for the majority of the internet searches. And if we see TikTok, it dominates youth information ecosystems. And recent 2024 example includes the hurricane misinformation with the false FEMA claims and health disinformation that WHO declared a priority public health threat. So the parallel, if we see that Suzanne's authentic experience was lost to Foe's editorial vision, and today verified information is drowned by human-designed systems that amplify sensational falsehoods and for profit. So algorithmic gatekeeping as the new gatekeepers, human choices in algorithmic systems. So this brings up to the new gatekeepers, as Noble's central argument is crucial in this, that mathematical formulations to drive automated decisions are made by human beings, while we often think of terms such as big data and algorithms as being benign, neutral and objective. They are anything but. So the human element, we can see that a human element in this is somewhere missing in some context, and the people who make these decisions hold all types of values, many of which openly promotes false notions. And so here is an example. While Noble's book was going to press, a Google engineer released an anti-diversity manifesto arguing women are psychologically inferior at software engineering. And Noble asks pointedly that are we supposed to believe that these same employees are developing neutral or objective decision-making tools? So AI and the Friday problem, as we have seen before, that AI and the problem of Friday's silence is becoming the same if we see that parallel. So this is a case study of 2024 US election, where we have seen that algorithmic misinformation were widespread across the world while the election was going on. And the conclusion. So let me conclude with 4 key findings of mine. That first is historical continuity. Colonial gatekeeping structures persist in algorithmic form, and Coetzee's questions about narrative authority remains urgent. Second is evolved mechanisms, that physical censorship becomes algorithmic deprioritization designed by engineers. Publishing gatekeepers become platform rules set by tech executives. Third is amplified stakes, that billions are affected simultaneously. Misinformation spreads globally in minutes, and AI-generated content is increasingly undetectable. So the fourth and last is the subaltern still cannot speak, as if we see, and as Spivak said, the subaltern cannot speak precisely because of the oppression of epistemic violence, and today this violence operates through algorithms. Why this study matters in today's era, as we face some democratic crises in today's era, while this misinformation and other things are going on, and my learning outcome. So analytically, I can now recognize how historical power structures persist in digital systems, and apply post-colonial critique to contemporary technology and identify narrative manipulation techniques. So in a theoretical way, I understand how Spivak's epistemic violence operates in algorithmic form and noble algorithmic operation framework. And practically, I can evaluate information sources critically. And the last is ethically. As Nobel reminds us, I need all the voices to come to the force and impact public policy on the most unregulated social experiment of our times, the internet. So these are my references. And before I conclude, I want to quote that the question of who controls the story is not just literary, but it becomes the question of our time in this era. So if anyone has question, I'll be happy to take that.
My question is, how can we resist misinformation and manipulation today?
So we can resist misinformation and manipulation today by keeping ourselves up to date with the information, by reading diverse and authentic sources day by day, and keeping ourselves on the way of every information, and that how the technology and other things are going on, we keep in mind, so that we can get aware of all the things that are going on in form of misinformation and manipulation.
So my question is, why is the title "Who Controls the Story" is important?
So, in my perspective, the title "Who Controls the Story" is important because the speaker or the narrator of the story controls the story. And if we see in novel or in a literary or in a practical way, that the who controls the story or narrates the story becomes the truth for people who are reading it, or reading or listening the story, and the actual story, as like Friday's story, gets unheard and marginalized. So that was from my side, and thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's my presentation topic is Silence Voice Feminist Resistance in White Sargasso Sea and Hellaro movie. These are my academic information. These are table of contents
So my research questions are: how do patriarchal and societal structures silence women in White Sargasso's novel and the movie Helaro? In what ways do female characters resist the reclaim identity and agency? So hypothesis is both White Sargasso Sea and Helaro depict how patriarchal and colonial systems silence women through confinement and cultural control, while Antuanans resist individually through madness and fragmented narration. The women of Helaro resist collectively through Garba dance, showing that feminist voice can emerge through both psychologically rupture and embodied protest. So, begin with introduction. So we know that Jean Rhys published the novel White Sargasso in 1966, and Abhishek Shah's movie Helaro published on 2019, which based on story on 1917. The concept in the Kutch, Gujarat Kutch. So in both we can find the abusement of a female character by the patriarchal norms, male character. So how their words are silenced. So we can find in both the concept in the novel, we can find it in the Antoine's character, and in the movie the village women. We can find that resist and how they resist. So in this presentation we will deal with it. So first, silencing in White Sargasso Sea. So Antoine is doubtly colonized by colonial power and patriarchal control. So in that novel we can find the concept of colonialism and patriarchal norms also. So when Rochester locked her in one room and kept key with him, so at that time he called her Bertha. So it's also connect with Jane Eyre novel, which written by Charlotte Brontë, and that White Sargasso is respond of that novel. So Bertha was character of that novel, and here that Rochester used the name Bertha for Antoinette when he locked her in one room, and she is a maid woman. So her madness becomes the only form of resistance against the patriarchal colonial oppression. And here Rochester, how the language also can identify in that article. I can find that the Guang article. So Rochester exert power over Antoinette, and how the being and saying that both language are also identified from that article. And here the Lacan's mirror stage, that theory also from that Lacan. So it in that theory we can mirror theory, we can find that a person who are so in the mirror. So at that time the concept was that how that person also their identity to that person who ordered him or her. So in that way we can find that Antoinette is now being a mirror of that Rochester, and in Helaro movie how they are shaped by that society. So silence in the Helaro movie, the women are forbidden to dance, to speak freely at their home when they are went to that water. So in that time they allowed to communicate freely. So how in the both we can find the dominance by the patriarchal norms, and they control the women. So here one quote that all her beauty and knowledge will be blown off in the kitchen. And the log space and attic rivers. Here we can find the log space in the concept of Antoinette when she was locked, and the rivers when they are went for river. At that time they were free. So Antoinette locked attic and cut off speech from society, and in the Helaro women confined to homes and river paths forbid the public expression. So resistance. So how they resist from it. So in the in the image we can find that the end of the novel was Antoinette resisted by the home bonds. So how she resists by the patriarchal norms, and in the another how the at the end of Hela movie that they from Garba that women resist against the male dominance, the patriarchal, and in that movie the widow woman we can find the resistance of widow women, also the story of that, and so we can find both resistance. So conclusion, both the White Sargasso Sea and Helaro portrays the women silenced by the patriarchal colonial norms and how they are silenced by them physically, sexually, mentally, and how they at the their rebellions all at the end we can find in this presentation. So these are my references, and thank you. Now you are free to ask questions.
So Nishtha, my question for you is, how does a space function symbolically in White Sargasso Sea and in Helaro movie?
Yes, Smruti. So in the attic, it means the room when the Antoinette was locked, and the river when at that place the women are free to communicate with each other. So in that concept, we can find how the patriarchy dominates to women. Yes.
How do women resist patriarchal control through internal and external actions in White Sargasso Sea and Helaro?
Yes, Mansi. In the Helaro movie, also when that male dominance knew that they're playing Garba in desert, so at that time how they lock their women, and then mentally and physically they abuse their women of village. And in White Sargasso Sea also we can find that how Rochester abused Antoinette and locked her in one room. And in the case of one widow in the novel, in the movie Helaro, we can find that concept of patriarchal control, and they resist by that Garba, and then was burning home. Thank you.
So very good evening, everybody. Today we are going to discuss about Defoe versus Coetzee, rewriting colonial narratives, comparing Robinson Crusoe with Poe's post-colonial lens. This is the personal information, table of content. Then first scope. This study examines how Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe constructs the ideology of European colonialism through mastery civilization and control, and how Coetzee critically rewrite and deconstructs this narrative from a post-colonial and feminist perspective. It explores how power, voice, and authorship shift from the colonizer to the marginalized and silenced figures. Then our research question that how does Coetzee challenge and subvert the colonial assumptions embedded in Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, particularly concerning power, silence, language, and authorships. Hypothesis: Coetzee's reinterprets Robinson Crusoe as a post-colonial counter narratives exposing how imperial and patriarchal ideologies silence the colonized and the female voice by giving space to the unspoken and the unspeakable for transform the colonial adventure into a meditation uh, on voice, authorship, and historical responsibilities. This is a sub question, and let's begin with introduction. So we all aware about Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, which was published in 1719. It's a say about story on a colonial narrative. This is a classical book, and it celebrated the European mastery, individualism, and the civilizing mission, which we can say portraying Crusoe's control over the Iceland and his subjugation of Friday as a natural and morally justified. After 2 centuries, Coetzee rewrite that story as an M4 in published in 1986, which we can say critiques this narrative from a post-colonial and feminist perspective, and highlight that silence, voice, and colonized and the marginalized, and questioning to authorship and colonial narratives. So its purpose is that to analyze how poets they use narrative silence and perspective to challenge the colonial assumption of Defoe, making readers reflect on who has the power to tell story and whose voice remain unheard. Its central idea is that Defoe's Crusoe embodies the voice of empire, a European man mastering a foreign land. We can say renaming it and defining its people according to his own values. Through his act of rewriting, Coetzee transformed a tale of colonial triumph into a reflection on silence, power, and storytelling itself. Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, colonial master narrative. So Iceland described as a symbol of empire. So when Crusoe go to Iceland accidentally, so he claims the name and control of Iceland, which describe the authority and ownership of Europe. Then we also know that it's reflect the Protestant work ethic and capitalism and individualism of the 18th century in England. Then yeah, we can see here that this quote, in a little time I let him know his name should be Friday. I likewise through him to say master. So this quote it's also reflect that word master. It's a describe that how ownership and authority explained in England. Then religion and moral justification. So if we see in a religion way, so that time Christianity is the describer in higher level, and in that Friday it's also symbolized the spiritual conquest along with material control. Then Coetzee for rewriting and problematizing subversive renovation of Defoe's colonial story. So Coetzee 4, it's a rewriting of Robinson Crusoe. So when he writes, so he used the intertextual parody and challenged the imperial discourse, and it's also exposed the voice, marginalized voice, who erased from that, and describe the colonial hierarchy and silence, hierarchy, and voice. If we see that Friday's, we all know that Friday's tongue it's also cutting. So this become a metaphor for colonial oppression and violence rather than mere absence. So through Susan Barton's attempt to tell Friday's story, Coetzee exposed how historical archives are shaped by exclusion, and how silent itself become a space of post-colonial resistance, authorship, narrative, and authority and power. So the struggle between Susan Barton and author also highlight that how writing and authority are tied to colonial power structure. The power to name, interpret, and define other scene in the treatment of Friday reflect how literature itself can uh, uh, perpetuate dimension, narrative and power, voice, silence, and authorship. So. Differs we all know that both most ofly both character are both Robinson Crusoe and Foy's both stories are character most ofly same, but both angle of view is very different. So Defoe's narrative authority is we can see here that Crusoe serve as the sole narrator and controlling the story and all events, and his writing and naming are acts of possession, asserting ownership. While and it's also like making a Friday dependent man and voicelessness man. But if we see in Foe, so Coetzee highlight the Foe's silence as the absence challenging the authority of the original narratives. So it's muteless become a muteness, and voicelessness become a colonized challenge, and emphasize that structural oppression. Critical insights here that power is negotiated through language, authorship, and the right to speak rather than merely physical control. So, Coetzee for rewriting and problematic, subversing, we can say, renovation of Defoe's colonial story. So it's a silencing authorships are also very different from the Crusoe's work, because Robinson's work, Defoe's work, because Robinson Crusoe try to Fridays and other character who was Danny, but voice is represent different. The narrative and power, voice, silence, and authorship. So Defoe's narrative authority, Crusoe serve as the solar narrative and controlling all our frame all events. The Iceland as a text and symbol. So Robinson Crusoe, we also know in this symbol, Iceland described as a symbol. Both story explain about we can say Iceland as a symbol. So but both are described as a different way. Then ethical implication and post-colonial reading. So as the example, a few journalists and review describe here about four. So historiography, metafiction, and the integration of memory in Foe describe that, show how Coetzee treats memory as a contested terrain and refusal to remember as a morally significant. Then conclusion. Coetzee Foe serve as a profound post-colonial and feminist response to Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, transforming a tale of imperial conquest into a meditation on silence, authorship, and power. While ultimately Foe challenges the very foundation of colonial storytelling, revealing that history and literature are built not only on what is told, but also on what is excluded. This is the references. Thank you. Now are you free for ask question?
So, Krishna, my question is, why is it important for post-colonial literature writers to rewrite canonical texts like Robinson Crusoe?
Yes, it's important because it's rewriting of post-colonial. Give a, we can say, give a, if we see in a reference of this novel, so give a voice to silences, and it's also we can say expose the power and bias to historical and literary authority, and try to challenging colonial narratives also. So it's very important. Next.
Krishna, my question is, how does the notion of ownership of land and people differ between Crusoe and Coetzee's foe?
Yes. If we see ownership in both novels, so first we see in Crusoe's Robinson Crusoe. So it's we can say ownership is absolute, because this story is this is very absolute, because this story is say about Friday's silences. While if we when Robinson Crusoe is go to Iceland, so they try to claim and control to Iceland and person like Friday. While if we see in Foe's novel 4, so it's a describer these silences exposed and describe that how narratives silence, how Friday's silences become challenges to colonial narratives. This from my side. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. And today's my topic is silence as a decolonial strategy, reclaiming a voice and agency in a genres, White Sargasso Sea and J.M. Coetzee's foe. Let's begin. These are my personal information, table of contents, and first is a research question. How do genres and J.M. Coetzee reconfigures silence from a marker of colonial oppressions into a decolonial mode of agency and resistance in White Sargasso Sea and foe. Another is a hypothesis. Silence in Rhys and Coetzee is not a passive absence but an active decolonial strategy that exposes the violence of colonial language and reclaim narrative authority for the silence object. So first we see introduction, and in a context, colonial discourse, historical quitest, speech with power and silence with submissions. Authors like Jean Rhys and Jem Coetzee challenges this binary by making silence a form of resistance, and both interrogate who has the right to speak and how silence itself can resist colonial control of narrative. What is the purpose? To in this purpose to explore how silence function as a decolonial strategy, reclaiming agency when language itself is colonized. To examine how Rhys and Coetzee transform silence into a speech, exposing the limits of colonial discourse. So first we see theoretical lens, silence and decolonial epistemology. Spivak's subaltern cannot speak exposes how Western discourse frames the colonized as voiceless, and Rhys and Coetzee show speech itself as the colonial violence. Decolonial silence refusal to participate in colonizers' epistemic system. Silence speaks through absence, destabilizing narrative authority. Another thing is silence as a Creole resistance. So in this work,
Antoinette's identity is a Creole identity. So her silencing by Rochester mirror imperial and patriarchal domination, Rhys transformation madness into a symbolic speech through silence. Her final act reclaiming voice through destructions. So Creole fragmentation and colonial language. In Antoinette's fragmented narration, fragmented identity, her identity. Written from the linguistic border between English and Creole silence. Rhys text destabilizes the center periphery binary, making silence linguistic rebellion. The Creole voice survive through the silence between colonial words. Coetzee, the semiotic of Friday's silence. In the Friday's missing tongue, colonial silencing. Susan Barton's attempts to give him a story when Susan writes about foe. So violence of liberal narrations. Coetzee refuses closure. Fridays remains a mute embodiment of trauma. In feminist and ethical dimensions, female narrators Antoinette and Susan both struggle to interpret or contain silence. Their inability reveals that colonial storytelling itself is compromised. Ethical listening replaces speaking a decolonial ethics of attentions. So here I comparative concept put here. First is what is the concept and in which concept. So first concept is a colonial silencing. White Sargasso, Antoinette renamed Bertha when her husband gave name of Bertha, and in Friday's tongue cut off. Narrative strategy, fragmentation, Creole rhythm in White Sargasso, and info metafictional deconstructions. Another concept is a voice and agency. In White Sargasso, silence as a revenge, as self-assertions, and in silence is a moral resistance. And concept authorial ethics. In feminist reclaim and info refuse to speak for other. Here see in when Susan want to write about foe, at that time refuse to speak for the other by foe. In conclusion, so Rhys and Coetzee turn silent into a space of agency and ethical awareness where the oppressed reclaim meaning on their own terms. Thus, silence speaks as a strategy of resistance and survival beyond the boundaries of empire. So these are my references, and thank you. Now you're free to ask.
Nikita, my question is, if silence is a refusal, what does it achieve in the narrative of White Sargasso and Foe?
It exposes colonial violence, destabilizes narrative authority, that creates ethical space for witnessing the silence other.
So Nikita, my question for you. Why do Rhys and Coetzee use a silence instead of a speech to convey resistance?
Because speech is often a tool, often a tool in colonial control, and silence lets marginalized
voices reclaim agency in participating in oppressive discourse. So this is from my side. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Tanvi Mehra. My today's presentation topic is Silence, Voice and Resistance from Fanon's Decolonization to Post-Colonial Rewriting by Rhys and Coetzee. These are my academic information, table of content and a research question. How does silence function as both a mechanism of oppression and a form of resistance in post-colonial literature, specifically in Jean Rhys, Sargasso and J.M. Coetzee's 4 hypothesis in Sargasso and for silence is not merely the absence of speech but a strategic form of resistance that subverts colonial authority. Introduction to post-colonial studies. So before we discuss silence and resistance, I want to mention Anya Lumba. She says post-colonialism is not simply the aftermath of colonialism, but a continuing constitution of its legacy. This means post-colonialism isn't just what happened after empire. It's about how colonial power still shape language, identity, and even silence. Here we focus on Fanon decolonization idea as a reimagine in Rhys, White Sargasso and Coetzee's 4. Both rewrite colonial narratives, giving the subaltern space to speak or to resist silently. Bhabha and Spivak remind us that voice is central to post-colonial identity. Rhys gives a voice to the silent Creole woman, and Coetzee gives silence meaning through Friday. Finally, Fanon says, decolonization is always a violent phenomenon, not just physically but psychologically and linguistically. So silence becomes both a wound and a weapon. It hurts, but it resists. Then Fanon and the theory of decolonization. Fanon defined decolonization as the violent substitution of one species of humanity by author. But this violence isn't only physical. It starts with psychological and linguistic liberation. Colonized people often internalize inferiority through language. As Fanon says, to speak a language is to take on a world, a culture. Spivak agrees that the colonized are often denied speech and agency, but Bhabha disagrees. He believes that hybridity, not violence, can offer a form of resistance. So decolonization is not just a physical struggle, it's a battle for mind, language and narrative. Then silence as colonial central control. Colonialism doesn't just control land, it controls language and knowledge in enforcing silence. Fanon says the colonized is elevated in proportion to his adoption of the colonizer's culture. Here, Rhys agrees. She dramatized how Antoine identity collapse when she mimics colonial norms, but Coetzee disagrees. Friday's silence is a conscious refusal, a moral protest rather than hopelessness.
And Bhabha calls silence a productive ambivalence, a space that unsettle colonial authority. Spivak warns, the subaltern cannot speak, shows that structural ensure often prevent true voice. Then Jean Rice White Sargasso rewrite Jane Eyre. Jane Rhys rewrite Jane Eyre from Bertha Antonin. A perspective gives voice to Creole women erased by British literature. She writes, "There is always another side, always," reminding us that history and identity are never one-sided. Her fragmented narrative mirrors the trauma of the colonized mind. Here, Fanon agrees. The colonized loses himself when he mimics the colonizer, but Coetzee would caution that voice can still repeat Western framing, so liberation is never complete. Bhabha celebrates rise hybridity, Creole and English together as a form of creative resistance. As a critic like Thomas, note that Rhys humanized the colonial other without oversimplifying her. Then silence as colonial control. Colonialism doesn't just take land, it controls language and knowledge, enforcing silence. Fanon says the colonized is elevated in proportion to his adoption of the colonizer's culture. Here, Rhys agrees. Antoine identity collapse when he mimics colonial norms, but Coetzee disagrees. Friday's silence is a conscious refusal, a moral defiance rather than hopelessness. Then Rhys White Sargasso giving voice to the silence. Jean Rhys rewrites Jane Eyre from Bertha Antonin. Then Coetzee for the politics of voice. Coetzee retells Robinson Crusoe from Susan Barton's viewpoint, highlighting colonial silencing. Friday's missing tongue symbolizes the inshore of the colonized voice. As Coetzee writes, Friday has no tongue, but this does not mean he is dumb. Susan's attempt to tell Friday's story reveals the power imbalance inherent in a representation. Here, Coetzee agrees with Fanon in critique colonial rationality and Enlightenment humanism. But he disagrees with Fanon on full liberation. He doubts whether true voice can ever be fully recovered. Then comparative framework. When we compare Fanon, Rhys, and Coetzee, we see different ways silence and voice function. For Fanon, silence represents oppression and voice is revolution. In Rhys, silence reflects trauma while voice helps recover identity. Coetzee represents silence as moral resistance and voice is often unstable or incomplete. All three agrees that language is power, it shapes reality and identity, but they disagrees in method. Fanon emphasizes activism and violent rupture, while Coetzee focuses on ethical hesitation. Spivak asks, who speak for the subaltern? And then theoretical intersections. All three agrees that colonial discourse is a control mechanism, but they differ in approach. As Bhabha says, hybridity is the sign of the productivity of colonial power. And some scholars like Perry and Sleman note that post-colonial rewriting itself is an act of resistance. Then voice as resistance. Here, silence and voice coexist at dual forms and defense. Then conclusion. to conclude, we move from Fanon's theory to Rhys and Coetzee's literary rewriting. The central focus throughout is silence, voice, and resistance. This theory and literature expose colonial trauma, challenge dominant historical narratives, and show the continuing constitution of power structures. So these are my references.
So my question is, how does Bhaba's idea of hybridity connect to globalizations?
Bhabha says cultural hybridity creates a third voice where identity mix, and in today's globalized world, culture meet, clash, and merge.
My question for you, can silence be a form of a protest in modern society?
Yes, silent protest, boycott, and choosing not to engage with oppressive system can be powerful, and even online choosing when to speak or remain silent. Silent can shift power dynamics. So this is from my side. Thank you so much.
બોલો. ઈ કાંઈ ન કરીશ ભલે. Okay. So good evening everybody. This is Rajdeep Bawaliya, and today I'm going to present on the topic algorithmic colonialism, post-colonial perspectives on AI ethics and digital power in the global south. Here are my academic details and presentation details, table of contents, introduction. So algorithmic coloniality builds on data colonialism by focusing on how algorithms impact resource allocation, human socio-cultural and political behavior, and extent discriminatory systems. So algorithmic systems shape who gets resources, who is visible, and which behaviors are rewarded. This creates new patterns of domination that echo older colonial forms. And AI colonialism is in need of decolonization politically, ecologically, and epistemically. And postcolonialism resists Eurocentric and highlights the continued relevance of colonial structures after formal decolonization. And colonial violence includes an epistemic aspect, an attack on the culture, ideas, and value systems of the colonized peoples. So knowledge systems were shaped to privilege European ways of thinking. AI can reproduce that epistemic violence when it treats Western data and methods as universal. Here is my research question. To what extent do Western designed AI systems reproduce colonial domination in the global south, and which decolonial governance strategies most effectively mitigate their political, epistemic, and ecological harms? With the hypothesis that AI systems designed within Western centric frameworks reproduce the colonial power asymmetries in the global south, producing biased outcomes, resource extractions, and epistemic marginalization, while decolonial governance and epistemic pluralism will reduce these harms. Here are my literature review slides. Now, coloniality and the colonial metrics of power. So, the metrics of power (CMP) theorizes how a system of coloniality underpins the structuring logic of artificial intelligence systems. And decoloniality is a practice of undoing and redoing the cognitive frameworks imposed by empire. So, decolonial praxis means changing who makes decisions, which values guide design, and what counts are valid knowledge. It calls for concrete institutional shifts. The development of modern Western knowledge system is embedded within and shaped by colonial discourses. And the colonial supply chain of AI extracts labor, data, and resources from the majority world for Western benefit. Then data extraction and digital colonialism. So global tech giants wield disproportionate power over data and algorithms and digital infrastructures, exacerbating existing inequalities and marginalizing indigenous voices. So platforms centralize data and control its use, often without local input or benefit that concentrates economic and political power outside affected communities. And data colonialism captures human life through appropriation of data extracted by platforms for profit. And AI tools developed for various sectors rarely incorporate data from SSA, even though they are used in the region's market. And the environmental costs of AI supply chain are disproportionately borne by majority world communities. So mining and energy intensive process degrade local ecologies. Then algorithmic bias and digital discrimination. So algorithmic bias systematic and unfair discrimination embedded in AI remains a pressing concern, especially in the global south. And the biases inherent in these algorithms lead to digital discrimination and a new form of colonialism, which is digital neo-colonialism. So algorithmic decisions can be bar people from services or opportunities. This digital exclusion reproduces older patterns of marginalization. And AI systems frequently fail to mirror the varied communities of emerging nations, misrepresenting and excluding significant social groups. Then the myth of neutrality mask power different shields and reproduce hegemonic Western knowledge as universal. Then this slide is about labor cost work and the colonial supply chain. Then epistemic injustice and hegemonic knowledge production. And this is about how governance gaps and Western centric ethics we can find in models. And this slide is how environmental costs we have to pay, and how extraction of have on very mass level of various resources. Then about paths to decolonial AI, epistemic pluralism and relational ethics. So decolonial AI requires epistemic pluralism, uh, pluriversal polycentric world without a dominant epistemic center. So models and methods should reflect many knowledges, not one dominant system. This expands what counts as a valid data and solutions. And adopting a decolonial approach in AI means putting the most marginalized and vulnerable people at the center of design. And decolonization is a politics of rehabilitation that integrates context sensitive local solutions into global projects. And decolonial AI rests in a self reflexive approach that recognizes power imbalance and implicit value systems. So practitioners must interrogate their assumptions and the social effects of tools. Reflexivity helps avoid repeating harms. Then practical tactics, design data and policy recommendations. So AI must be informed by localized diverse data sets and co-development strategies driven by affected communities, and value sensitive algorithm design VASD and participatory approaches can prevent ellipses of local moral values. So embedding local values into algorithms changes outcomes and respects cultural norms, and participant gives people voice in technical voices. And establishing regional AI research centers, revise curricula, and ensure data ownership and governance reside with global South actors, and enact accountability mechanism, uh, reparative funding and technology transfer to readdress structural imbalance. Here is the conclusion and the call to action, that algorithmic colonialism is a multi-facted injustice, and political, ecological, and economic and epistemic, that requires integrated decolonial responses. So no single fix or suffix. Responses must be systematic and context sensitive, and solutions must be combine ethics, policy, capacity, and community power. And reversing dominance requires a global South authority in AI governance and design. And AI can be a tool for decolonization when guided by epistemic plurality, relational ethics, and material reparations. AI a call to solidarity, that research, policy, and grassroots movements must collaborate to hold tech power accountable. And alliances across scholars, communities, and policymakers create leverage against interchanged interest, and collective action is essential. Here are the learning outcomes. Here are my references. Okay, thank you everyone. Now if you have any question.
Radip, my question is, what role do arts and popular media in the global south play in shaping alternative algorithmic imaginaries that resist tech hegemony?
So as we know, arts and media create stories and images that question tech dominance and very imaginate different futures. They surface local values, languages, and practices that can inform better design and data choices. They also mobilize public debate, build cultural legitimacy for alternatives, and inspire community-led technical experiments that resist hegemonic models.
So my question is, how can we build quantitative metrics to measure the decoloniality of an AI system across the political, epistemic, and ecological axis?
So for that, as per my knowledge goes that first we have to define three clear axes. First is political, in which we can include data sovereignty, then local governance and benefit sharing. Second is epistemic, in which we can include data set representativeness, language diversity and inclusion of local knowledge. And last in the ecological, supply chain extraction, energy footprint and waste. Then next we pick measurable indicators for this axis, and we have to score them and combine them into a transparent composition index with stakeholders, and we have to determine their weights. And finally we have to validate the index through local participation of the audits, then public reporting and regular updates to reflect changing context. Okay, thank you everyone.
So, hello everyone, myself Mita Chambucha, and today my presentation topic is Bollywood, Nation and Identity Decoding Post-Colonial Narratives in Indian Cinema. These are my personal information. Research question. Research question on nation and historical memory. How do films that historicize the colonial past, such as Lagan and Swades, construct and sustain an inclusive nation identity by reconciling historical trauma with contemporary challenges of unity and self-determination? Citizenship and mobilization. How is the relationship between the nation and the citizen reimagined in political narratives, and how do films like Rang De Basanti shift the moral imperative of nation issues like corruption from the institutional level to the moral corruption of the citizen subject? Hypothesis. Bollywood operates as a central cultural mechanism of post-colonial resistance by deploying a hybrid cinematic from a construct a nation identity that is simultaneously rooted in a traditional Indian culture, practiced and dynamically capable of transforming rather than merely opposing the pressure of Western modernity and global influence. Table of contents. Introduction. Today, my presentation explores how Bollywood reflects and reconstructs India's post-colonial identity through cinema. Using key scholarly perspective, Bill Scroff's idea of post-colonial transformation, Vikas Path's analysis of Bollywood and the colonial past, and Akshaya Kumar's study of cinema, citizenship, and activism. This presentation examines how films like Lagan, Rang De Basanti, and Swades portrays the nation as both a historical memory and a living idea. Bollywood, as Bill S. Croft explained, does not merely imitate Western modernity, it transforms it. Vikas Pathe shows how film like Lagan reimagine colonial history through cultural resistance and nation unity. Finally, Akshay Kumar highlights how Rang De Basanti connects cinema with real world activism, showing the citizens' role in shaping a moral and participatory nation. Together, this perspective reveal Bollywood as a post-colonial sweep where global modernity, Indian tradition, and nation consequences merge to tell the story of who we are and who we aspire to be. So first, start with Bollywood post-colonial transformation and modernity. So
Bill Ashcroft in Bollywood, Postcolonial Transformation and Modernity explains that Bollywood is not a copy of Western cinema, but a post-colonial transformation. It reshaped global film style to express Indian identity and values. So, what is the central argument of this article? There, that Bollywood is not simply product of globalization or Western imitation. Instead, it represents a post-colonial transformation where Indian filmmaker absorbs Western cinematic influences but reshape them to express Indian identity, values, and nationalism. So, first key idea is cultural resistance through transformation. So, Bollywood resist Western dominance, not by rejecting it, but by transforming it. It uses global films techniques but add Indian songs, emotion, and community themes, creating its own unique style. Hybridity and modernity. Bollywood blends tradition and modernity. It shows that Indian identity is flexible, mixing family values and spirituality with modern ideas and lifestyles. Globalization and identity. Even in globalized world, Bollywood keeps a strong Indian identity. It reflects India culture and connects people worldwide through familiar emotion and tradition. Post-colonial modernity. Ashcroft calls Bollywood an example of transformed modernity. It shows India can be modern its own way, not by imitating the West, but by adapting global influences to local culture. Case study of Rang De Basanti and Swades. Rang De Basanti, modern youth and post-colonial identity. So, Rang De Basanti, modern and youth post-colonial identity. This film shows how India's youth reconnect with the idea of nationalism in a globalized world. The character begin as a carefree students influenced by Western culture, but after discovering the story of Bhagat Singh, they realize the importance of social and political action. According to Ashcroft's idea of resistance through transformation, they don't reject Western idea. Instead, they turn modern activism and media influence into tools for Indian changes. It shows how post-colonial identity it a flexible mixing global awareness with Indian values and emotional depth. Swadesh homecoming and national building. So in Swadesh, the main character Mohan is a NRI working at NASA, returned to Indian and reconnect with his roots. So his journey represents what Ashcroft calls post-colonial modernity, someone who has global education but uses it for local development. The film balances modern technology with traditional wisdom, showing that idea can be modern without losing its identity. Just like Ashcroft's theory, Swadesh proves that true progress comes from transforming global ideas into local action and responsibility. So, Bollywood nation and identity, decoding a post-colonial narrative in Indian cinema based on Vikas Pathel's article. So, Vikas argues that Hindi cinema does not just entertain, it actively reconstruct India's colonial past. Film like Lagan retell stories of colonial operation, not as a dry history, but through compelling storytelling and emotion, which makes audience connect deeply with the nation's struggles. So, Lagan is a prime example. The villagers' collective fight against unfair taxes represent more than just a cricket match. It symbolized unity, resistance, and the shaping of India as a nation. Through such narratives, Bollywood becomes a shape where the nation is remembered, imagined, and even reimagined. Some key concept. This is a post-colonial identity. This is about how people define themselves after colonial rule, blending past experience with a modern imagined nation. So, case study of Lagan as a national identity. In Lagan, set in 1893 during British rules, villagers fight injustice through a cricket match, and the game of cricket becomes a metaphor for resistance and transformation. So Vikas writes that Lagan portrays the imagination of India as a nation while narrating the fight against the British. So in textual connection. So Rang De Basanti and anti-corruption movement. So in first we star power and activism and in the nation. So second, the post 2021 political connect. So the third, the narrative of the citizen subject. Bollywood is a contact zone, music hybridity and nation identity. So Bollywood functions as a connect zone where music hybridity and nation identity interest. Unlike Western cinema, songs and dance in Bollywood are often important or even more important than the plot with the classic. So Bollywood music is a hybrid space that continually defines modern India identity. So conclusion, Bollywood functions as a crucial dynamic post-colonial space where India continually debates, remembers and reimagine its national identity. So furthermore, these films often translate political critique by focusing on the moral corruptions of the citizen subject, mobilizing the audience towards a cleansing of the self for national renewal. So establishes it is as a dynamic context zone where tradition meets global influences, proving that the post-colonial Indian identity is a flexible and continuously evolving self, far more powerful than simple entertainment. These are learning outcome. These are my references, and thank you.
As we have discussed about movies in post-colonialism, so could you compare the narrative function of the protagonist in Lagan and Swadesh?
So in Lagan, the protagonist leads a collective fight against colonial oppression, inspired by unity and resistance. In Swadesh, hero drives the self and so personal and social transformation.
Mita, my question is, how does the music in Bollywood oppose the principles of classical Western cinema?
So in Western cinema, music supports the story. In Bollywood, music drives a blending of dance, songs, and drama as equally powerful storytelling tools. So thank you, everyone. This is for my side.
Okay, so today, while managing the time, we are able to complete in due time. So tomorrow also be careful that there is no need of bell, but you can complete within 7 to 8 minutes, and then 2-3 minutes for question and answers can be given. Okay, so quick feedback to all the things. Last one to start with, Mita presented on Bollywood films and couple of films like Swadesh, Rang De Basanti or Lagan. These films were taken. Now, when we read this, in the morning also I have suggested that you have to have a little bit of digging deeper into it to see that. So there is a very interesting connection that we see now that can be seen as a coloniality or post-coloniality, either like this form of storytelling. Some might consider it as a influence of being colonial, not post-colonial. Like we are still colonized, like the mind is still not free. So our imaginations are not free. So what arguments they give? They say that we still require somebody who is a foreign return. Then only he can solve our problems or can read our problems or can identify our problems. So if in Swadesh, the protagonist is not going to America, he can't see the problem here. So those people who are living in India are not able to see the problems. That is a huge problem that the narrative says, and that is a kind of a reality also. So why we still need the Western lens to identify our problems? Why are we not able to identify our problems without Western lens? In Rang De Basanti or in Lagan, there is a white woman who plays a significant role. Elizabeth in Lagan is the one who steals the red ball. Like Prometheus stole red ball fire for humans from the heaven. The same way Elizabeth is stealing. Otherwise, this Bhuvan team was playing with cloths, a ball made of cloth, and they will be defeated easily. They don't know what is this ball also. So without the role of a white woman, the defeat of the white team, British team, might not be possible. So again, our stories rely on white humans, white women. Rang De Basanti also had the same story, that there is a lady coming from US as a part of a project to see the young people of India, keeping in mind the diary that was written by her grandfather, who was a jailer when Bhagat Singh and they were in the prison. So she had a great idea that the youth of India will have this all charm, like Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad. But then when she comes down to Delhi University, finds that all are lafangas. They all are dancing midnight, drinking liquor, and completely casual and careless about the freedom that they have got. And then she makes a documentary where they all are playing a role, and the transformation comes slowly. So without white women, there is no transformation. Without going to America, we can't see our problems. So that is that colonial insight in all this, that people try to debate whether these are colonial films or post-colonial, or they are coming somewhere between the threshold of coloniality and post-coloniality, or like we are in a global world. We can't be completely aloof from the Western world now. It is nearly impossible. Our stories, our imaginations will operate in this manner only. Will we accept that identity, that hybrid identity, where our existence in all the stories, if we see, is not possible without the Western culture's influence in any form. NASA is there, or research project is there, or anyway, the role we see that. So that we need to go deeper into seeing what way coloniality and post-coloniality operates in the stories. Other two good presentations we had from SMRUTI and Rajdeep. They both in a way similarly talked about AI algorithm and how we look at the idea of decolonizing from data, decolonizing from data. And in both the presentation, we had this idea of global south also, global south, and how we try to see the one group, that is the developed countries, which are normally northern countries, and then the south of the globe are normally the countries which had a history of being colonized or poor, underdeveloped or developing. In this, the two countries like India and China are not like other countries because their economy is stronger compared to African smaller countries or Latin American countries, which becomes a part of global south. So if these two countries, but they have a different similar history. Their influence with coloniality has a similarity, so they also become part of this global south. Or other, the voice of global south comes from these countries. they want to make a kind of a counter to US, Europe, by keeping all these other countries together. So they always try politically to see that all these smaller countries remain with them. So this idea of global south emerges from that. But the question that comes when we see that these companies are American companies, Alphabet, Meta, and they control the data. Now, if this control goes from them to the global south countries, what we can see that people will be really free, or will it become more dangerous? Can we rely on Chinese companies that they will be free and they will give all the information quite fair and square? We have seen the case study of DeepSeek, and we know that they will completely deny to say anything about their government. Now, OpenAI will tell you everything about American government. Grok will tell you anything about Elon Musk, who is the owner. But will Chinese company or Indian company be able to do that? So when we give power to global south, now these companies will try to hide information from us, then what will happen? So that is the solution that we need to think also. So we need to move towards data democracy in this. Right now we feel that we are under the control of corporates. Corporates are there, Meta, Alphabet, they are the companies which are. Companies' interest is in profit. So for the sake of profit, they may sell our data or they may do advertisement. That is what they will do. But that will be seen as a much lesser evil as compared to what global south companies will do or global south governments will do. They will do surveillance. They will control the people. So then we will find that, well, advertisement was much good thing to happen. But this is more dangerous. They don't give information. DeepSeek tries to hide the thing. Then they try to control the people. And then they would say that you are searching all these things. So you are anti-national. You should be in the prison. So only by asking some questions to an AI chatbot, the state governments may penalize the people. Then what will happen? So how we compare these things? Corporates monetize. The state will try to moralize us. It was said morally that you should be a good citizen. Nation should be first. So there will be data nationalism. From data, this one we are looking for data democracy. But what will happen possibly is that there will be data nationalism, and then we will be moralized by the state that be a good citizen. If you want to do this, you have to do like this. The recent video surfaced from, I think, Uttarakhand state or some other part where there was a beauty contest and some girls were preparing, and then some people came and said that this is not our sanskar. You should not participate in beauty contest. This is Western. So be free from Western. So this is moralizing. So then people will say you all can dance together. You have to dance with Hindus only. Then they may say with your caste only, not among the Hindus also. You have to be careful that this all other Hindus should not come and dance with you. Like there was a video surfacing that some Dalit women were not allowed to have the Garba. Now in villages there are separate way of celebrating. This is all moralizing. So how we look at this world, where if we try to question, that's why that video I talked, that was very important, that how the tool of Marxist other thing are misused by nationalists or nationalism debate. That is what is the fear here also. That is exactly is the fear here also. That well, they will be saying, yes, let us make you free from European control, American control. But then will you make us completely free from control? Or you will say, come under our control? Is it changing master or what? So that is where you can say that. And so the worst scene may happen in global south is when such governments join hands with corporates. Then it will be terrible. In America, corporates keep on fighting with government. They keep on struggling with government. They don't agree with everything. But here the chances that they may join hands. Then what will be the freedom of human beings? What kind of freedom humans will have in all these things? In today's scene, we can opt out. I can say, I don't want to be on Facebook. I don't want to use any digital platform. I am free to opt out. When the global south countries and companies will take control, it will be like Aadhaar card. You will have to have it compulsory. Even though Supreme Court in India has said that Aadhaar should not be compulsory, you know that now at so many places you require Aadhaar connection, like DigiLocker, your ABC ID, it is mandatory, and it becomes very strong. So they will say you have to be on the social media. So we can trace you what you are thinking, what you are seeing, and we can take care of you. They will moralize that before the bad thought comes in your mind, we will take care of you. We will take you to the asylum, to hospital, that he may be mentally ill. What is mental ill? Thinking against a nation is mental illness. So we will be under the hospital care, which is the new name for jails. Jails will be known as hospitals. So they will say that you are under care, and we are taking. So that is the thing. Oligarchies, elite, how they might be taking control. And as we see that BSNL, if BSNL takes our data, that's not a problem. But if a private company has a control over our data, then it is very alarming also. So this needs to be added when we try to decolonize from the Western companies' control. What will the global South countries do? What is the level of democracy in global South? That question also is very important to be asked here. So freedom will not come from changing the master, but dismantling the mastery itself. What is being master? That is to be read. By only changing the master, freedom will not come. So normally in this discourse, people would say that as Europeans told us that Mughals are bad. They are despotic rulers. Then they wrote history about how cruel they were. Who wrote? English people wrote that history. We discussed that several times in the class. So why they were telling us that? They said they changed the master. They were bad masters. We are good masters. Replace us. And then we have seen what they have done. We were having around 20+% of GDP in the world. And we were having great manufacturing in cloth, muslin, and all this thing. Our poverty is reduced to less than 3% of GDP in just 150 years by the British people. By changing the master, what happened? All those things, the richness was in India. There was no profit was not going to Afghanistan or anywhere from where the Mughals came. It was not going out. It was, but then in the British time, profit started going to UK, United Kingdom, and England also. We changed the masters. And that is what has happened. So now again, when we are at this conjuncture of such a time, when we talk about AI and data and other thing, this lesson needs to be kept in mind also, that we want to dismantle mastery itself, or we want to change the master. So that was good presentations made by both of them. Nirali, you need to improve your speech and speak more confidently. That you will have to keep on practicing. Now you have only one semester left to improve your speech performance. Sagar and I think who else, even SHATAKSHI also were not able to give answers. So this is not fair. You have prepared the presentation and you should be able to justify by giving proper answers also. If you are not able, like your slides are very good, but you don't know how to answer that, it means that you have used generative AI. You have done the theft, copy pasting only without understanding. So that is going to be very dangerous. People are already criticizing Gen Z for all these things, that they only do the licking and spitting kind of a thing only. So you have to be very careful that if you prepare content very good with the help of AI, but if somebody is asking you 2-3 questions, you are empty. You have nothing to answer. you are not able to answer, then you will be criticized. You will be categorized as all those people who try to make a show of being knowledgeable by using generative AI, but actually they are not knowledgeable. Actually, they don't know anything. So see that you are not categorized like those people. ROZMIN presented well. Okay. Many of you are presenting learning outcome, and that is good. Okay. SHRUTI also presented well. Add some of the articles from Taylor and Francis. Some of you are doing that. So try to bring those articles from Gestor plus even from Taylor and Francis also, because during this 5 days only you will use that. Then you are not going to use. Afterwards, you will never go to what is honors or what is T and F or what is Gestor. So we have this days only where we can tell you that use this article. So you give footprints on the digital platform. SRUSHTI also made a good presentation. Okay. Devangi also did well. You were talking about this poor countries, and in that context, you were trying to see that how. But some examples need to be given that how poor countries are neglected or silenced. That you have to give as a real life examples. Mansi also presented well. You have cited some of the articles from Taylor and Francis, but I was not able to open those articles. It was asking for this around $50 per article. So you might not have read the articles. But I was not able to. How were you able to open it? Out of 3, only 1 was opening. 3 you have cited. So if you are able to download and read entire one, then share in PDF with me that article. Because here under honors also it was not opening this article. So if you are able to open, then share with me that. SMRUTI we have seen. Okay. Nishtha on this film, Helaro and this. You also cited one good article by Mayank Jha from Taylor and Francis, and he talked very interestingly about film Helaro in this context. But there was no connection about colonialism in that. It was all about patriarchy, but not in context of colonial. So to connect colonialism, again, you'll have to see that how do you see colonialism? For example, if you want to connect that there is a military where the husband of the female protagonist is working. Military is colonial relic, and then he is working there, but that doesn't support. So what? This village is completely remote. There is no education also. So you can't So this then you have to see that how the man will see, he wants that beautiful lady who is coming on television, but that beautiful lady will be of no use in that rural space where you have to go for farm labor and other work, and you have to have children. So that way also we can connect that the way the Western influence, the beauty standard, the lifestyle is coming through television to rural India is damaging. So that needs to be seen, that how that damage reaches. So in Helaro, there is no television also. Nobody is watching television. There is no education. There is no such colonial connection. It's all and all out and out rural India, completely unpolluted by any Western influence. And yet it is not good society. That can be questioned. That we want to say that we want to purify our society from Western influence. We want to decolonize. Now you see here a decolonized world. Is it a good world? Is it a fair world? We'll say no, it is not a fair world. So a connection, a cultural connection with the other world has given some benefits also. So when we see, so that how the films like Helaro tries to portray a kind of a rural space which is out and out Indian, out and out. There is no influence of an outside world. And yet you can't see that this is very good, because India is uninfluenced by the West. So India is good. As people want to see, many times they say that cut down this part of history. આ ભાગ જે છે આપણો એ કાપી નાખો. મુગલ સાથેનો ભાગ કાપી નાખો, અંગ્રેજો સાથેનો ભાગ કાપી નાખો. એટલે સિદ્ધા આપણે એની પહેલાનું ભારત જે હતું એ બહુ સારું ભારત હતું. ત્યાં આપણે ચાલ્યા જાય. So then you can question that idea, that concept with this Helaro, that this is unaffected by a Mughal kingdom or even by the British Raj. Can you consider it is a good India? That or not? So that way we can question. Its retelling also is happening. That event is retold. Nowadays it has become a big festival also, because now everything is turning into a big religious festivals. In our time, everything is turning. So you will see that on a particular day, thousands of Ahiranis get together for Garba, and then they dance around Krishna. So the untouchable Doli has been turned into Krishna. And all those women has turned into gopis. That is the retelling of that, and it is now performed also. It is not only in story; it is performed also in that way also. How the theological retelling of this episode is happening, and its performance also we are seeing. And every year, the Guinness Book of World Record will see that more and more thousand number of women has increased now. It will keep on increasing also if you follow that story. Then you can see it in an interesting manner also. Okay, Krishna Baraya did well. Nikita also on 4 and Sargasso C. Okay. Tanvi presented something about agree, disagree, but still it was not making a proper sense about in what context you are putting agree, disagree. Okay, so with this we end today's presentation. Tomorrow again we'll meet for another topic.